This Choircast podcast episode is brought to you by my book, Breaking Bad Faith, Exposing Myth and Violence in Popular Theology to Recover the Path of Peace. I'm Michael Camp. The book helps people break damaging beliefs that are based on myths. It exposes the big lie that God brings justice through retribution, punishment, imprisonment, the death penalty, lenient gun laws, American wars, final judgment, and eternal damnation. Find it at Amazon.com.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
All right. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. My name is Nat Turney. I'm here with my brother, John. As always, say hi, John.
Hi, John.
And up in the middle square of our Hollywood squares, we have the effervescent, the ever-efficient, energetic, empathetic, enigmatic.
Wow.
Now I'm just popping off with all kinds of E-words.
Wow. This is amazing.
Ephemeral.
Amazing. Can I borrow an E, please?
The egregious. I'm going to stick with egregious.
That feels right.
I feel like I'm like a Princess Bride scene. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. She's egregious, I tell you. Bethany Shea, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, it got close to that one. It was high. Everybody high. See, I just it charmed you. That's what it was.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes, Nat.
Just a little charm goes a long way towards compliance. I do love it. This is the podcast, by the way, that we lovingly call This Is Not Church, because if it was church, you would have left by now. Mm-hmm. And I'd be right there with you. John's right there with you, too. He's actually got the car started. It's running in the parking lot. He's literally sitting still, peeling, burning rubber while we all go, come on, make a break for it. And Bethany's trying to feed us cookies and beg us to stick around.
I will try to get you to stay. I love the church. I love her so much.
We have cookies. And that's all. That's all we've got is cookies.
No, what? No. You've been involved in some.
Come on in.
You've been involved in some really poor church experiences, and for that, I'm so sorry.
I have. I've been in charge of some very poor church experiences. I have to own that. But anyway, as always, we have an awesome guest, and I want to not dilly-dally any further in introducing her to you today. Kristina Frugé is Director of Congregational and Community Initiatives with Augsburg University's Riverside Innovation Hub. Equipped with 25 years of ministry experience and a master's degree in congregational mission and leadership, she works with congregations exploring their call to become vital neighbors. She is the editor and contributor to a book entitled Hungry for Hope, Letters to the Church from Young Adults. And she is our guest today. So welcome to the podcast. How are you, Kristina?
Thank you so much. I'm doing lovely. Glad to be here.
Wow, we're glad that you're here. If you don't mind, we'll just jump off with a sort of standard question that we like to ask a lot of folks, since this is ostensibly a faith-based. I keep saying, I think it is still, right, John?
Yeah,
we talk about faith.
Yeah,
we talk about faith. Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we like to talk. We like to at least start off just sort of getting an idea of your spiritual background. Maybe if you've deconstructed, if that's what's happening in your life, what might have, what has led you down this path to where you are today, or whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I grew up in Midwest, Minnesota, born and raised in the ELCA Lutheran Church. And so I do have a long history in church communities, and certainly parts of my story that include lots of heartache and disappointment and frustration. But there is a pretty deep gratitude for the ways that I was loved and equipped and encouraged to use my gifts by adults in my home congregation. I'm kind of a bit of a theology nerd. Like, I like big life questions, interesting questions. And so, have enjoyed places that allow me to do that, and ended up studying social work and religion in my college days. And that has led kind of on a couple distinct paths in terms of the kinds of work that I've done. And then now where I'm at in my role at Augsburg, where those paths have kind of overlapped. So I've been in like the social work space and more kind of community spaces. I've been in more traditional church ministry youth director kinds of roles. And the last 8.5 years now, I've been able to be in this pretty unique role at Augsburg, which is also an ELCA college in the Twin Cities here, although I think we have more Muslim students than Lutheran students. It's a very diverse on all levels, religiously, racially, socioeconomically. We have a program for students in sobriety. There's some specific programs that work with students coming out of foster care. So it really is a beautiful student body, and I wouldn't say a very we're known for being a very diverse community with a lot of different perspectives and folks there. So there's a deep rootedness in the Lutheran tradition there, but how that gets expressed is in this really beautiful, diverse way. So I've certainly deconstructed some things over the years. I've had to move outside of the church, but I kind of like this church adjacent role. Like, I still really believe in the value of Christian community and faith community and really community in general. And I think there's an important role that church plays in that. I'm in a stage of life where I'm kind of moving even closer back into a place of really feeling like we really need the church. We need a different witness. We need a louder witness to what is out there right now in a landscape of a lot of Christian national nonsense. So
yeah, I don't disagree with that.
On and on, but I'll pause there.
No, that's as much as you want to share is great. I think John and Bethany and I can all relate to all of that. Maybe not the ELCA part, just because I've never been a Lutheran, but the E in ELCA stands for evangelical.
It does, yes.
Tell me, though, how, because in my understanding of ELCA, would not use the word the way we have seen that word used recently.
Yes.
Is the ELCA not as conservative as, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be wrong about that denomination, but it seems like that was a little bit more of a progressive mainline.
Yeah, I think there's a wide variety of folks in the ELCA. It does tend to lean, at least where I am in the Twin Cities here, fairly liberal, progressive. And there are a lot of, it's a very kind of congregation-centered denomination. And so you will find a wide variety depending on the context in the church. It really picks up more probably the culture of the place that it's a part of. So
that makes sense.
It's not surprising that there's a lot of progressive Lutherans in the Twin Cities because we're in the Twin Cities.
Right.
It definitely a kind of traditional mainline church. And so in the sense that the evangelical piece is not maybe interpreted contextually in the same way.
No, I get you. I went through a phase of life where I tried to I'm taking the word evangelical back. And I don't know. It's pretty far gone as far as, just in the vernacular, just as soon as you hear that word, for me anyway, I go, my ears perk up and I go, ooh. I don't tend to think of that with the ELCA. But if someone says, we're courting the evangelical vote, I don't think you're the ones typically.
No, probably not. Probably not.
But anyway, I agree though. John and I, even though we have left the church, I think we both would affirm the value of community, would affirm the value of even church community when it's healthy, and when it's, living within the best ideals of what Christ taught.
Right.
I absolutely affirm that. I have no issue with that. I don't necessarily want to be a part of it, but I'm not out here like tilting windmills going, screw the church. So much of it has been co-opted.
Yes.
And so much of it has been hijacked by people with nefarious motives. And I don't think an inkling of what Jesus actually thought or taught, and have just used him, as John Fugelsang said on our podcast a while back, as a mascot. They worship him. They sing songs about him, but they dare not actually follow him or do the things he said. So I agree with you. This is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think because I get to be in relationship with folks from all different kinds of congregations and oftentimes more lay leaders than certainly a lot of pastors and church staff, but a lot of lay leaders. And and then being in a context like Augsburg, like the words we use really matter.
Yeah.
So it is important to have expansive language, to have other words available to talk about the thing you want to talk about, or you might end up not being able to have that connection.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Have you been involved with Luther Seminary much?
Yes, I graduated from Luther in 2009. I have a Master of Arts in Congregational Mission and Leadership, and still have some colleagues and friends and former classmates from that community. So that is, also to kind of, there's a lot of Lutherans in the Twin Cities here, certainly not the only denomination, but there is kind of a mecca of sorts of the ELCA here. And the Luther Seminary is part of that tradition. So we have Augsburg and Luther has some overlap in services, some shared services too. So
awesome.
Our organizations have some ways they collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a beautiful, they share a lot of their tools with the wider religious community. I use a lot of their tools for working preacher and value their leadership tremendously. As I'm a pastor, and I use a lot of what they produce, and it seems like they probably have influenced the way that you see the wider community and how to create spaces of belonging. And I mean, even with this book that you helped edit, it's like a space of trying to figure out how young voices and people outside or maybe on the fringe of religious communities can experience belonging. Have you, what was that experience like for you, even just to edit the book and to read some of those stories? And what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, the book was made possible through a generous grant from the Lilly Foundation through a young adult initiative. And we had been a part of this initiative and received a second grant to basically share what we had learned, and thought who better to share that than, young adults. And so we hosted a gathering at Augsburg about 3 years ago with 50 young adults from around the country that applied to be a part of that listening session. And basically we told stories. Folks talked about the ways that they have experienced joy and meaning in their faith experiences, and also a lot of the hurts and harms that they've experienced. And from that came the themes of the book. And then we went about, we put out an application process for young adults to apply to be a co-author on a chapter. And then we recruited some folks in our network that were scholars or thought leaders on the different themes. And so all in all, it was 22 authors that we convened over a couple years. We had 2 in-person retreats that we gathered at to write together and build community, really, and trust. Most of these folks didn't know each other before coming together to write a chapter. And I know there's authors here on this podcast, so you all know the writing process is no small feat. And then to put 2 voices together, and then to put 22 voices together, it was, I don't know that I would recommend a project of this scope on the backside of it, but I'm so glad that we did it. And it really was a good lesson for me in the creative process, because it was, you just had to kind of take each piece at a time and kind of do really good listening. Like, a lot of the work of editing was just being a really good listener and asker of questions with the authors to be able to amplify the voices and stories that they wanted to share. And I'm really proud of what we were able to pull together in the book.
How did you find people to write? How did you find these young people?
Well, we have some networks across the Young Adult Initiative grants that we've received from the Lilly Endowment. So there's other institutions across the country that have received some funds to do innovative ministry with young adults in different ways. And so we were able to put the ask out that way. We have, a congregational community and network here in the Twin Cities through our Augsburg. I mean, relationship. We've followed those lines of relationship to get the word out. So there's definitely voices we didn't get. Everyone is speaking for themselves, not for a demographic, whether that's their age or gender identity or race. But yeah, we were able to, I think, get a wide variety of voices to share, and a wide variety of Christian backgrounds too.
That's really cool. That's awesome that you're able to find the people and then bring their voices together. And I found that oftentimes retreats are an amazing way that builds people's trust towards each other and curiosity towards each other. Did you find that the people in these that wrote these things, did they want to be catalysts essentially of new communities? Like, were they wanting to start their own thing, or were they just writing their experiences? Like, what was the end result for some of them?
Sure. I mean, I think people came to this project from some of them are in ministry. A handful of them have been through seminary, are young pastors, or deacons in the church. We had a few professors. We had a woman who does work in prison ministry. We had healthcare professionals and teachers and psychology students and people that work in judicatory parts of the church. So I think folks came together around this to amplify a story, and to invite people into the kinds of conversations that they believe the church needs to be taking seriously. Really, the way the book took shape was as the chapters emerged, we started to see each chapter as a table of sorts. And so our authors have created space for conversation, even in the way they dialogue in the chapter. But it's an invitation for the reader, for whoever, groups might be reading it together, to wrestle with some pretty important questions around marginalization and liberation, around our climate catastrophe, around sex and sexuality, around issues of power and abuse of power, and trying to invite people into these conversations, not with answers, but with a posture of curiosity and hopefully some encouragement to be kind of courageous in that space. The opening chapter is about courageous curiosity and kind of how we need to be able to come together to wrestle with the things that really matter in the world, and inviting the church specifically into those conversations. And many of them, I think, depending on your church experience or context, are conversations that often get avoided.
Yeah, I think so often, well, I'm a United Methodist pastor, and there's this language that's always pushed on to pastors right now, you got to learn how to revitalize your congregation. And it just feels very, I don't know, like a facade. How do we got to put up new signs or use new language? And I don't think that's a bad things necessarily, but when it comes to young people, they're bullshit meters are so high. They can tell when you're not being authentic and when you're not more truly real. When you're trying to reel them in, they know when you're trying to hoodwink them. And so having more spaces for authenticity is really important. Have you found that to be true within what you've been working through?
Yeah, I one of the statements, I think, in the introduction of the book with one of my colleagues whose name maybe should have been on the cover, but Amanda Vetch was a young adult in our project who had a number of roles, and she was kind of my right hand in the editing process. But she's always talked about, as a young adult, not wanting to be known about, but to be known. And so there's a lot of anxiety in the church around the decline, around the aging demographics. For a lot of people, this is super personal. It's their kids or their grandkids that don't have, a connection to the church anymore. And there's a lot of real grief there, but it can turn into anxiety, and it can turn into now we have to figure out millennials, or figure out the next, Gen Z, Gen Y, and then we have to market to them or attract them. And it is just so off-putting. It's actually going to make things worse. And so that way to kind of flip the script of actually, no, I just want you to know about me, and not know who I am, not know about my, fill in the blank, whatever demographic it is that's causing anxiety. So that authenticity does really, really matter. And folks that I know in our networks that have made that the priority more than trying to revitalize the congregation, but tried to set that aside and think more about how do we cultivate life-giving relationships? How do we create space for meaningful relationship, whether it's in or outside of the church? Let's set the church's survival aside and let's think about the call to be in relationship, which is really what Jesus is all about.
Well, I think one of the hard things about that within the church itself is when we want to make room for those new expressions, the churches, from my experience, especially the mainline church, is a very aging population, where authenticity and being open and vulnerable is it's not a muscle that they've used much of in their lives. And so to create spaces of hospitality that looks really authentic and vulnerable is really scary. And and it's hard to like make changes that might be more inclusive. And so just putting like a rainbow flag out is like the biggest thing they can do. But when it comes, and they're very welcoming people, very loving people, but yeah, it's hard to create multi-generational groupings. So would you recommend, as like a parachurch or, this person that's kind of outside of the church looking in some ways, would you recommend starting new expressions of faith or trying to create those spaces of inclusivity between the generations?
I think the premise of that question is maybe not where I start. Like the idea of like, what kind of church do we need for younger adults? I think that is in the mix, but I think really the driver that I care about and that I think is a through line in the book and in a lot of the work we do with Riverside Innovation Hub is around cultivating relationships with the people in your context. And so that the young adults could be your own kids or grandkids. It could be neighbors. They might not be people who are ever going to show up at your church. But if this is a sense of curiosity and a like start by listening to the young adults that are in your life and see where that leads, without having it to be towards the point of like, what are we going to do about young adults and their need for church? I think we need to let folks kind of come to that conclusion of what they need on their own and try to be the kind of trustworthy people that are in a young person's life and see what kind of transformation happens in those relationships. And I think there are lots of young adult leaders out there. There are young folks out there that are trying to lead. Like if you do have young adults in your congregation, by all means, then make some space for them to actually try some things. And they might need the pastor or someone with power to kind of broker some of that for them. And I think for those that are connected to congregations that do want to, have an impact there to be able to help them by resourcing them, by supporting them, by not just saying, oh, sure, you can join X, Y, or Z leadership position, but what are the resources you actually need? What are the barriers you're going to run into? And how can we support you in this? And I think there's lots of folks out there that are, trying to support new forms of Christian community. And so maybe that's another way a church wants to support young adults is how can, as their congregation is aging and maybe moving on, maybe there are ways to kind of resource and nourish other forms of Christian community that are being developed in their community. But it requires some curiosity. It requires that you kind of get to know what the lay of the land is in your local context.
No, absolutely. In my experience in church, we pandered to the youth, to the young adults and the youth. We created spaces for them that were separate.
Yeah, right.
So, and we equipped them and we spent money on them. So it for all appearances, it looked as though we valued their input. But we valued it over there across the hall and on off nights when those groups would meet with their own pastoral staff, and then maybe twice a year they would get invited in. We did not solicit their opinions on an awful lot. One thing that you said that really stood out to me, which is I think as if I was to sort of distill my own dissatisfaction with a lot of this, would come down to a lack of the thing you have been talking about, which is curiosity. Mm-hmm. There is a severe lack of curiosity and not across the spectrum in institutional church. I'm again, like curiosity about everything. How do we invite queer voices into our spaces? How do we do a better job of bridging the gap with different socioeconomic backgrounds of people? How do we bridge the gap of this seemingly very segregated church experience on Sunday mornings in much of America? Yeah. But a lot of those questions were met with some hostility, because what we craved most I'm only speaking from my experience, what it seemed like we craved more than curiosity was certainty.
Mm.
And that
Yeah.
that comes with a certain amount of concreteness to it. And then you get very defensive when those pillars that you've come to trust in are questioned, or your curiosity comes to bear against them. And you go, what do you mean by authority of Scripture? What does that even mean? What if I don't buy it?
Right.
Is that the kind of curiosity that you're talking about? Sort of.
Absolutely. And our authors that wrote the chapter on courageous curiosity, Amber Clean is a young pastor here in a small town outside of the Twin Cities, and Rashida Washington is a community leader in a lot of ways. But they talk about this posture of courageous curiosity that kind of goes to battle with the killers of curiosity, the defensiveness. We've always done it this way. And I think that takes different shapes and probably some different ways in denominational context. You know, in a more conservative or fundamentalist context, there's a lot more. It's really important that there are very clear black and white boundaries around the belief systems, right? There's maybe a little more fluidity on the belief side in some of our mainline church spaces, but there are other things that are very, that are sacred cows or that are high points of anxiety. And I think the good news about curiosity is that you can transform anxiety and fear into curiosity. That's actually not a far jump. Like that anxiety about the future of our church, that anxiety about, do we have the right beliefs? That's an energy that if you're willing and if you have other people around you, you can turn that into a different kind of question. Well, I wonder what God is actually up to in this change that we're experiencing. I wonder not, oh no, how are we going to get young people back to our church? But I wonder what God is doing in this time where this big change is happening, and who might we then need to talk to? It can just kind of loosen the rigidness around fear and anxiety, and when there's a certainty, when there's an ego, which also has a fear underneath it, but that can be a little bit harder, I think, to shift. That no, we already do know all the answers. We already do have all the right ways of thinking about this. That can be a little bit harder. That's a little bit longer journey to get to curiosity. But if you can get underneath the certainty to what the fear is, to what the anxiety is, I think you can move with a few change of language, the way you frame the question into a more curious way of thinking about it.
Well, and then that curiosity can become, because for us, it was always what you mentioned, and I think what Bethany mentioned earlier. Our conversation is centered around, how do we get these people here? What programs do I need to have that will attract this age group demographic? And that's where the bullshit meter comes in, Bethany.
100%.
Because I 100% think you're right, that people were like, they can sniff out, oh, okay. It reminds me of the olden days. You're not old enough, Kristina or Bethany, to remember this, but what we used to call, what do we call it? Basically, it was friendship evangelism. There was another word I used for it. But it was like the Methodist Church said it like this, and I loved it in all of our Emmaus walks that we did. Find a friend, be a friend, bring a friend to Christ. That was how it was. This is how we taught kids in what we called Chrysalis, which you probably are aware of. Bethany, the teen version of Walk to Emmaus is called Chrysalis.
No, that sounds beautiful.
You've never? Oh, yeah,
I've never done it.
You never done? Oh, it really is pretty cool. But it's the same sort of program as a Walk to Emmaus for adults, but it's for like 15 to 18-year-olds. But I said that when I first started doing it, I'm like, that's beautiful. And then the third or fourth time I said it, I'm like, that's kind of fucked up. Because there was a built-in end goal. There was not make a friend for the sake of being a friend. There was not, hey, let's get to know this person so that we can expand our experiences, broaden our horizons, and go, hey, the end goal was
ulterior motives. Yeah.
It was almost like, the Mormons that would visit my house. And if I didn't accept their invitation to church by the fourth or fifth time, they were going to stop coming because they were told to, basically shake the sand from their sandals and move on.
Yeah. You're a waste of their time.
Yeah. So the curiosity gets quarantined somewhat in very pragmatic things. And I get it. I think I do. See if does this match your experience, either one of you, where the other things are very intangible. Whether or not they come through the door on a Wednesday night for a youth service or something like that, I can count that. I can quantify that. So I understand, sort of that they would lean that away. But I never saw any real effect from that. I mean, all that really happened was those kids got older, and then we absorbed them into the old people church. They just aged out of their curiosity level. So I don't know. There's no question in that, by the way. I just think curiosity is. I love that. As soon as you said that, my brain went, oh, yeah, that's it. That's such a huge missing ingredient.
Well, on the opposite side of that, when you don't have that curiosity and you use that friendship evangelism and bring them into the church, and then something happens, right? Something happens to make them start questioning that. And then there's the grief.
Yeah.
There's this loss of community because they realize that there was no real connection. They didn't, like you said, Kristina, they didn't get to know me. They don't know me. They're trying to woo me into a sense of belonging that isn't really there, right?
Yeah, the ulterior motive is it's the hidden agenda, and you've both mentioned the bullshit barometer of younger folks. I was on another podcast earlier and I had to ask if I could swear. Nobody really answered me, so I'm glad you asked that, because that's the reason I wanted to use on that interview.
We've given tacit permission to use all your words,
but it maybe you used to be able to kind of get away with some of that, but I don't think that happens anymore. And that doesn't feel good. And to your point, John, about the grief, so when we had this gathering of 50 young adults, we spent 2 days telling stories together, the highs and the lows, the heartaches, the joys, the gratitudes of young people's experience in church. And then we tallied up like the themes. Grief was 3 times higher than any other theme.
Wow.
And so we address it in the book in a chapter, but really each chapter is speaking to different ways that folks are grieving and have grieved, both in the church, but also ways the church has come alongside of them, maybe in their grief. And there's actually this really beautiful, but hard and heartbreaking thing about the shared human experience of grief. It actually is really powerful common ground if we can find a way through the fears, through the avoidance of being vulnerable or authentic. Like that is where a relationship can form, is in that common ground of grief. Yeah. And churches are grieving a ton.
Yeah. You'd think we'd be better at it.
You would.
But
we have
really
some tools for it.
Well, and we absolutely do. I mean, I think, I'm sure I wrote about this at some point, but we've all, I'm sure, experienced our fair share of grief, and we've gone through our things. The church tradition that I sort of gravitated towards was this very sort of prosperity gospel faith, word of faith movement. They don't do grief at all, because to admit any of that is a lack of faith. So you can be going through
praise
hell
God all the time,
because God is good all the time, and all the time God is good.
All the time God is good.
How are you doing? Blessed and highly favored of the Lord. No matter, your life could be completely falling apart. And it got so weird, that even to say I'm having a really bad day, I would be chastised and told,
wow.
Whoa, don't speak that into existence. I'm not speaking shit into existence. Just telling you that's what's happening.
It already exists.
I'm having a bad fucking day. And you could say, it took me a long time just to learn how to say, oh, geez, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
And just learn to sit with people in their grief. But man, we have scriptures full of people bitching and moaning and lamenting and crying and grieving. And there's an entire book, Lamentations, holy hell. And we have not learned to grapple with this grief thing very well. So much so that we have added on to people's grief.
100%.
And that's a heartbreaking thing to do, because the church, if nothing else, should be good for that. I mean, it should be a refuge for people who are grieving. But so often we just sell platitudes and easy answers. Or we're so uncomfortable that we don't know the easy answers that we just kind of distance ourselves from people who are grieving. yeah, I don't know. I applaud that part of it. I could see how that theme could come up repeatedly. Through every sort of topic, there'd be a tinge of that at least going, oh yeah, well the grief showed up there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good news for churches to know that grief needs our attention because, like we said, there's tools, there's resources, there's scriptures, there's parts of our story, there's theology that and we know how to gather people around ritual, around prayer. I mean, this is a gift that I think the church should get curious about.
Yeah.
And both how they can accompany people in their grief, but also like ways that they may need to be doing some grieving of their own, because that unprocessed grief and that unnamed grief comes out sideways. It comes out with the anxious, like, oh, we need to get the young adults to come back to church. We need to get all the families with young children to come back to church. And then so that anytime someone walks through the door under the age of 50,
we latch on to it.
Yeah. And then you feel the bullshit meter goes off. And
man,
this doesn't feel right. I don't feel like I'm, being seen for me. So that unprocessed grief is not good. It's a big part of why we are where we are.
The church I pastor, we're going to do Lament for Advent. And I'm just curious about how if you had your druthers and you walked into a church that was doing something like that, and you know what you know about different generational grief, how would you facilitate a space like that on a Sunday morning or Wednesday evening?
Wow. Well, that would be fun to sit around and brainstorm. I mean, I think that, my first thought is what kind of on-ramps could you create for folks?
Yeah.
And that could be as simple as a question. I think having a variety of on-ramps, though, knowing that you're going to have some people that are going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going through it right now. And they would welcome the chance to talk to someone about it. You're going to have some people that have maybe never really opened up about that. So are there ways that people could write? Are there ways people could be in silence? Are there ways people could share with others? We haven't done this. Well, I take that back. I have done it with a few churches through the Riverside Innovation Hub, but it's something I did back in my ministry days, where we actually did like a storytelling time after a worship service with the congregation, and we had a through line. I was leading the children, youth, and family programming there at the time, and we did just like, we had a big butcher paper up on the wall with kind of the timeline of the church's history mapped out, and we just asked people on Post-it notes to write the red letter days, like the big celebration days around youth and children in that church, the sad day, the blue days were grief, were loss, were moments that were really hard, and then green were times of growth, and we kind of framed it around children, youth, and family, but you could kind of curate that in any way, but it let people kind of somewhat anonymously put parts of the story of the church. And then we kind of facilitated through some group storytelling. Oh, look, a lot of people here talked about when you opened the new Sunday school space, and there was a partnership with the congregation nearby, and you had these joint Sunday school programs, and then this was the season when we lost the pastor, this was when this tragedy happened in the community, and it's a way to kind of do some group storytelling, to kind of name how those things are in relationship, the grief, the celebration, and oftentimes the growth shows up after the grief. So there are neat ways you could like do kind of some collective reflection on the story, but I think Advent's great. I like a lot of times people might think Lent in the mainline world of doing lament in Lent. But I love thinking about that.
Advent is such a dark time that, traditionally where you're supposed to like bring more and more light in every week, but starting with like the reality of sadness and grief and not shying away from it, and just what the people in those early stories would have experienced, all the uncertainty, and yes, Christ was born, and that's something to sing joyful noise about, but it didn't solve everything. The birth of a savior didn't solve everything in that moment. And so even in the midst of little bits of joy, there's still, it's just really hard. Life is really hard. So, yeah.
I know there's a few congregations around here, and I've gone to one, but they do like a blue Christmas service.
Yeah.
And so even just like thinking of how hard the holidays are for lots of folks. Like if you've lost someone, or if, your world is drastically different than it was previous holidays, people are really holding a lot.
Yeah.
In these special seasons.
And it gets amplified in those seasons.
Yeah, it totally does.
You're surrounded by people who are seemingly in the midst of joy. My wife's mother passed a few years ago, and her birthday is December 24th. We haven't had a normal Christmas Eve since she passed, because it's always tinged with, but mom should be here. And we had an experience last year where we went to another family member's house, and my father-in-law has remarried. And we're like, hey, we want to have a little symbolic birthday party for Carol. I don't want her to be forgotten. And they wouldn't let us do it.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Matt.
Or, because they didn't want to make the new wife uncomfortable. I'm like, she married an 80-year-old man. What does she think? He didn't have a life before? And his wife just suddenly doesn't exist? The hell is your problem? So there is a lot. All that was to say, that's just barely thinking about the holidays and knowing that it can be a time of profound grief for people. And again, amplified by the fact that you maybe don't feel like you should be sad when everyone else around you is festive and happy. It's kind of like celebrating Mother's Day and making a big deal out of Mother's Day when your congregation is full of women who've lost children or can't conceive children or don't want, all kinds of other, and we just sort of hold this paragon of motherhood up as this virtue that they can't have or that has been taken from them without even acknowledging the fact that those people live in your congregations. I just feel like we've done a piss poor job of doing this. And I think we could take a note. Bethany, you should, if I were you, I would reach out to a local rabbi.
Okay.
And I would say, because I think the Jewish tradition does this much, much better.
With sitting Shiva.
All of it. I mean, there is a process for grief.
Right.
I'm not saying it's perfect or great, but I'm just saying they don't run from it. I'd build myself a wailing wall somewhere and be like, you know what? There is something to be said for help. Even the New Testament scriptures speak about there's times when we don't have words to say and our prayers come out as utterances and groans because we don't know what else to say. There's a time when I've gone through things before. So I've talked about the issue with my daughter and how sick she was. Those were my prayers when they weren't laced with profanity and other things. But man, there's a lot to learn in that space of how to be there for one another in those times. But yeah, I would definitely. I don't know if you have any synagogues in Eureka. It's a small town. Is there a Jewish community?
We do. I just was on a meeting with one of our rabbis today. So
that'd be very cool to kind of bring that perspective and say, okay, you know what?
Yeah, or even inviting like a hospice chaplain or people that are close to, who walk close to that pain in their day-to-day lives. I think would be really powerful.
That could be very powerful.
These are great ideas. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I think there's something really helpful about ritual. And so whatever that looks like a ritual can become a container for an emotion or an experience that people might not know what to do with otherwise. So you can actually kind of make it safer for them to create space for that, whether that's as simple as lighting a candle and saying a name. I think it actually can help people. It can be one of those ramps into having that experience and not having it feel like, oh, everything's going to come over me if I make room for this.
Last thing I'll say on the subject, well, for now, but I can't promise that. But another thing you said that was so true is that it is a unifying thing because where, I guess it's possible to get through this life and never experience joy. It is absolutely impossible to get through this life and not experience tragedy or joy or grief of some kind. I think it is the one human characteristic that we can all go or experience. We can all go, yeah, I've had that. And I'm honestly mistrustful of people who haven't because either they're not acknowledging it or they just haven't lived long enough for it to happen. but it does. I've sat in hospital rooms and bonded instantly with people going through not the same thing, but similar enough things that we go, okay, yeah, we get this. There's a bond there. Go ahead.
Well, and across generations, kind of back to this, the orientation of the experience of young adults and older adults and grief, and this gathering that we hosted at the launch of the book, we had invited 5 leaders to be keynote listeners at our event. So they were there, all different generations, but older than the 20-somethings that were most of our participants.
You said keynote listeners?
Yeah, I know.
Keynote listeners. Yeah. So they came and they listened and they were in the space. And then we gave them some time at the conclusion of the event to just kind of reflect back and mirror back some of what they heard. And one of our guests, one of our keynote listeners, was the former bishop of the ELCA, Mark Hansen. So, led nationwide, a big denomination for many years, is a dear friend of mine. He came in to that invitation very much with some things he wanted to impart and encourage this younger generation with. Like, he knew what he wanted to share, I think, when he received that invitation. But by the end of our time together, he had scrapped his notes and he shared about the grief he heard in the room. And he shared about how it was connecting with his own life at the time. He was caring for an aging spouse with memory loss who has since passed away. And there was not a dry eye in the room. I mean, we were all of a sudden, the ground was leveled. The age differences were just a different, unique reflection of our humanity. And we were all kind of in this space of like how much it hurts to be human, but also how beautiful it is that we are connecting in this space. So, if listeners take anything away from this conversation, I hope they pay attention to grief and I hope they pay attention to relationship. Like, those are the 2 things that I think. And curiosity. We'll add that.
Yeah. I love that. If there's one defining characteristic of my life currently, it is I am just insatiably curious. And possibly because for so many years of my life, that was stifled. And now I'm like, no, I want to know everything. I know I never will, but I want to learn. So there aren't any topics that are out of bounds because I need to know more about this. John and I, the best part about this podcast for John and I has been inviting people into this space who we have no idea. We never have, from week to week, we honestly don't know what we're going to talk about. We may have an inkling because they have a book and they may not. We invited our first guest who was trans on the program, and we had a steep learning curve, and we're met with genuine kindness and inclusion, because I think they understood that we just wanted to understand this better and I can't be a good ally if I don't understand the topic and I don't even know the language to use. So we've made a purpose to bring in people. We've had friends who are Muslim, have had atheist friends, I just want to know enough that I can, well, first of all, no, I don't, there's so much more to know, but just to keep that expanse broadening. You know what I mean? You said one of the things you said earlier was using expansive language. Our life should reflect that in our willingness and our desire to be expansive in our knowledge, not just of stuff, but of people. Because that's the one thing that bothers me. And it's not a specific church thing, but the church world that, in my experience, has become so insular. It's a place where we go to be in our echo chambers and hear the things reflected back that we need to hear back, and we can silence the dissenting voices. And now I'm in search of those dissenting voices. That's
good work.
I hope so. Mm-hmm. I sleep better at night.
Good.
And it has brought me an immeasurable amount of peace and joy. I mean, just from the experiences of getting to meet people like you and go, well, hey, I might not have ever sat down with it. Well, in my non-denom days, I would have looked down my nose at anybody who was in the denomination because I knew, because we're so much better than them.
That's right.
What a cry. So I just think it's awesome. I think it's beautiful. That curiosity thing is going to be a bell that will ring in my head for a little while, but very cool. Courageous curiosity.
Well, courageous curiosity.
And For me,
John,
what it all kind of comes down to for me is this idea, and we've talked about this with our last guest, Bob Cornwell, this idea of the open table.
Yeah.
Everyone's included, everyone is accepted, and we just want to take the time to get to know those people. Not have a table of people that are exactly like you and just expect to just to be one homogenized idea, but this idea that everyone's welcome, right?
What a beautiful concept. I love it. So other topics though, this before I know we're running out of time here shortly, but so what are the major topics does your book touch on as far as these conversations with these young adults, these letters to the church?
Yeah, I should have grabbed the book so I had it handy
it's all good.
here. So there's a book on courageous. They're the opening chapters on courageous curiosity. We have a chapter on tokenism, kind of specifically through the lens of young adults and kind of the young adult experience. There is a chapter on creation and destruction, which is looking at the kind of the global climate catastrophe that we are in and how we make sense of that, grief and loss and lament. We have a chapter on mental health, of course, because if we can't talk about mental health, we're missing a big part of where the sources of grief are and just, people's lived experiences, I think, around that. Power and abuse of power. There's a chapter on marginalization and liberation that kind of talks a little bit more holistically about the different ways that folks are marginalized and what that vision of liberation looks like and what the responsibility is of the church to participate in that. There's a chapter on sex and sexuality, and really that there's a lot shame we haven't talked about, but that is a big theme in that chapter. And again, like the things that we're not supposed to say we're unhappy. We're not supposed to talk about things that are potentially embarrassing. Like all these things that we've kind of been cultured to avoid. I think a lot of the chapters kind of bring those out more into the open. There's a chapter on community and Christian community. So there is one that's kind of dedicated to thinking about church and what is Christian community for. And then the last two chapters, we've got one on Beyond the Walls. So this is kind of the call of the church to kind of turn itself inside out, and rather than anxiety over revitalizing and vital community, like how do we be vital neighbors in our places? And maybe that is a way to understand the call of the church in the world that looks a little bit more like Jesus. And then the closing chapters on scarcity and abundance.
Ooh,
and so the kind of the curiosity and the scarcity abundance kind of are nice frameworks.
Yeah.
Kind of setting up for the book, and then also like offering this other lens that we could maybe that helps us get to a more curious place rather than the scarcity mindset that has us holding tightly to everything and assuming others are going to try to take the things that we need or want. There's it doesn't set up a very good framework for being good neighbors.
No, it takes me immediately to Brueggemann and his. Yes. So it's like, okay, as soon as I hear this guy, I'm like, oh, first read that from him. Gosh, it's been years now, but I'm like, okay, that it is. You're right, but that is the myth of American imperialism. It's the myth of capitalism. It's the idea that there's only so much of this to go around, and I've got to hold on to what's mine. Yeah. And when we've been offered in the gospel, if you believe it, we've been offered abundance, and we've chosen to side with more often than not. We've chosen the fearful side.
Right.
What if this is the last little bit of this I ever see? I have to hold on to it.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I would love to see. I'd love to see the church operate in that. That reality of and then to maybe redefine what abundance even means. Because there are certain church traditions I've been involved in where they absolutely believe in abundance, but it was a very specific kind of abundance, and it was for a very specific handful of people who said the right things, did the right things, and pulled the right levers.
There's a bit of a reframe in the chapter around abundance as enough.
Yeah.
And the authors kind of come with their own experience of like ancestors that came to this country years ago, decades, like generations ago. And one of our authors who is an immigrant herself. And so just kind of talking about that mindset of like extracting like the resources in a way that like does deplete and actually does like the practices of exploitation and commodification and consumerism and even just like the agricultural practices of farming in those, the westward expansion just like stripped all the rich abundance out of the environment and made it hard for us to experience the abundance that was there. So just, there is a different way, I think, to imagine abundance.
Yeah, for sure.
That isn't rooted in like excess.
Well, excess, and that's the thing, is that abundance in those circles is excess, And I remember sitting we had this guy come in to preach from out of town, and the audacity now is he's since passed on, so I can talk about him. But he white guy, pastored a mostly black church in a very poor part of Detroit, but he was rich as hell, and he used that as a point of pride that, when he would come, so he's preaching in our little West Texas town, and he's like bragging about how many houses he has and how many motorcycles he owns and how many vacations he takes and promising us that we can have all of that too. All we have to do is put enough money in the collection plate and unlock the blessings of God. And I'm like, you freaking charlatan.
Yeah.
And at the time I was not. I was like, oh man, I want some of that too. Because I was indoctrinated and inculcated as well. But that reframing of abundance as enough.
Yeah.
And if I think about that, my wife and I were talking about this just the other day. We're thinking about when we were first married, we didn't make any money, but we always had enough. But there was this sense of abundance that like, there was no excess. There wasn't like we weren't rich, but I felt like in my late 30s and 40s, I was scrambling for more. And I had way more than I did then. Does that make sense? I just like we had learned at one point to be content with enough and to enjoy that. And then at some point that focus shifted. So yeah, all of those are such good conversation topics. I wish we could talk to you for another hour, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And man, I tell you what, remind me of the name of the book one more time. It's in front of you. It's
Hungry for Hope.
Hungry for Hope.
Yeah. Letters to the Church from Young Adults.
Awesome. And I'm assuming, is it out now? Is it available now?
It is available. Yep. It was released in August. We do have a website, and there's a toolkit on the website, so you can download different discussion questions for each chapter. Yeah. We hope it will set up conversations like this for folks around kitchen tables or after worship or with young adults or anyone of any age actually in your life. Because I don't think the topics are really young adult topics. It's just that we've got a younger generation of folks that is looking at the world with a much more stark reality than what some of us maybe grew up thinking. The myth of progress will just continue and things will get better. Like younger generations are saying, this, we need to listen to them. We all need to get to the same table and wrestle with some of these things. Even if they don't have solutions, we can find ways to accompany each other in the stuff that's hard about what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah, I love it. We will definitely link to all that stuff in our show notes and encourage everyone who is listening still to pick up a book, purchase one from a local person if you can. If you cannot, I guess you can give Jeff Bezos some of your money too.
If you want to order from Moon Palace Books in Minneapolis, I think they'll ship to you. They're our local bookstore and they are carrying it. So.
There you go. Moon Palace Books in Minneapolis.
Yeah. Nice.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're huge fans of local bookstores, man. I don't have very many where I live because, Texas. But I grew, I'm not lying. I live in a town of 100,000 people. I think we've got like 2 bookstores. That's just sad. It makes me sad. But anyway, we'll make sure to do all that and link to all your other stuff. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and discussing the book. It sounds, I just wish you the best of success in all of it. And we'd love to catch up with you sometime, see how things are going.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Any parting
Kristina.
shots, John or Bethany?
No, again, just thank you very much for taking your time. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, really grateful for this. Thanks, Kristina.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.